Welcome back to another episode of the Odd or God Pod, where we talk about sobriety, spirituality, and everything in between. This week, we have a very special episode. We have a little bit of a legend here in the Valley when it comes to the recovery scene, and we are just super grateful that we're able to land him. He's got a busy schedule. He made some time for us, and he's really going to make it worth it. This week's episode is all about living in the solution. We're going to hear a little bit about Ray's life, what it was like, and then we're going to get right into what it's like now and what he's doing today in his program in order to maintain sobriety, and hopefully it helps you guys out. So, without further ado, Ray, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Eric. Thanks again for asking me, guys. Hello out there. My name is Ray P. I'm a cocaine addict. My sobriety date is September the 12th, 2004. I'm grateful to do this. You know, Eric and I have been going back and forth, and I was able to finally reach out to him and say, hey, let's get this going, man. And, I'm grateful that you asked me to do this. Pretty excited. Got out of my comfort zone, so to speak, but I've seen you've been doing this for a while, and it seemed like you guys are doing it for the right reasons, and it's awesome to see you guys doing this, especially doing this and helping out the recovery community as you do. But a little bit about my story. I got sober in 2004,
Wow.
Like I told you guys,
The Bush era.
Wow. It was I got a little over 19 years sober, and my sponsor, whenever I hear him speak, he always says, I'm a person living in long-term sobriety. And a few years ago, there was a big movement, and they had a big rally for mental health, mental awareness, for substance abuse. And they had it down in Washington, and they went down there and did this march. And that was kind of the mantra, was that people living in long-term sobriety. And I kind of latched onto that because it's important for people to realize that, when you get sober and you go through any 12-step program, and that you realize that you can have some permanent sobriety in this, but it all starts in that beginning, and for me it started, I grew up, you and I were talking earlier, I grew up in a loving home. I'm from Texas, and had parents. My mother died she was in an automobile accident when I was in 10 years old, and so my dad kind of raised us. I was raised in a religious home. My dad's, they're Southern Baptist, and so nothing really traumatic happened in my life. Some things happened as I was growing up, but nothing that really, drugs and alcohol didn't really start playing a role until I got into my high school years, and kind of moved up. And then when I got into, when I was drinking and got into some trouble during high school, but when I finally got out into college, I got introduced to cocaine, and that's kind of where my addiction started, and fast forward, I came to Arizona. My wife was from this area, so they moved over here, so there was nothing for me left in Texas, so I said, I'm coming to Arizona, and we moved to Mesa, and they tell you can't outrun your shadow, and so I came, and so did my disease, my addiction, and we moved here, and didn't take long for me to find the people that were doing the things that I was doing, and fast forward, I ended up getting in trouble at work and went to a treatment facility in 2002. Went to treatment in Texas, came back, relapsed after 2 years, and as my date says, September the 12th, 2004 is when I got sober, and I had a seizure from cocaine. Is what I had, and ended up in a rehab here in Chandler, and found my sponsor, and realized that if I continued to do the things that I was doing in my life, that I was going to die from this disease, and there's a reading in the book, that our literature, that says if I continue to drink and use alcohol, it's going to kill me, but if I stop, it's going to kill me. And that's kind of where I was at that jumping off place that they talk about. I was at the edge of the cliff, and if I jump, was I going to jump into sobriety, or was I going to jump and end it all? So that's how I ended up. I got the sponsor and got into a 12-step program, and he showed me a better way to live. He told me if I wanted to continue this journey that I had to keep giving away that was freely given to me, you know, and that's where I started sponsoring and guys, and I felt that's kind of where God had put me to go, and that, you know, that's how you stay sober, right? Is reaching out to the newcomer. Yeah. And so I started sponsoring a bunch of guys, and those guys got guys, and so on, and you know, you have this host of people that grow about you, and that's kind of what I do today, you know. Maybe not as intense as when I got sober, but that's what I do on a daily basis. So yeah.
That's and here's a little testament to Ray. Long before I ever met Ray, I knew who he was, and that's usually a moniker for like how good of a program you're working is, because I would meet all of these guys and somehow they were all connected and their grand sponsor was Ray Pena, you know, Ray P, you know, and it was just like I would meet all these guys and somehow it would get tracked back to this one guy, and I said, well, you know, he's got to be doing something right. And then, you know, over the years and whatnot, then I finally met you. But that is the solution, right? The solution is having that spiritual awakening, you know, clearing the wreckage of our past and then moving forward with that, with the new design of living, right? And then showing somebody else how to do the same thing.
Exactly.
And that's, you know, really what I would like the kind of theme motif of the episode to be, is just for everyone watching, the majority of people that are reaching out to us on TikTok and on Instagram, they're very early in sobriety, and they're always asking for resources on like, well, what do I do next? Right? And you're in that moment where you're scared, you're unsure of what's going on, you're in some legal problems or whatever it is, your family's problems, and you don't know what to do, but you know something needs to happen, right? And so I want to kind of just you get your thoughts on crossing that bridge, right, and moving into sobriety and finding recovery, long-term recovery, like you have. So wherever you want to take that, I mean, I'll let you kind of lead it.
You know, Eric, I think it's important. When I first tried to get sober in 2002, when I came back from Texas, I didn't have the support was there, but I wasn't ready for it, right? I was going to 12-step meetings, and I knew some guys in the program, but I really wasn't, I wasn't plugged in, right? I didn't have a sponsor, I didn't have a home group, and I didn't have a service commitment that I was accountable to on a daily basis, right? And when I came back to Arizona and I had that relapse, and I came back 2 years later and I was in treatment, especially in the state of Arizona, but in Phoenix and the surrounding valley in particular, this is kind of like the mecca for recovery, right? And so it was easy for me to plug in with a group of guys, with a home group, with a sponsor, and to get around the fellowship, because if that was what kept me sober, right? So I tell guys all the time, you know, there's a friend of mine that always says, you know, we're living in a spiritual kindergarten, right? But eventually you graduate to the first grade. So what do you do there, right? So here I am, this raw nerve exposed. I'm coming out of treatment. You know, I'm separated from my drink or drug for 30 days. And so now what do I do after that? You know, I'm just kind of thrown out there back into the world, and I don't have any type of tools or any type of support when I go out there. And what I found here is I tell guys all the time, you got to get a sponsor. You know, get some guys that you ran around with in recovery, that you were with in treatment or wherever you were at, or in a sober living, and hang out with those guys. And that's what it was for me. I was kind of the guy that was kind of standoffish, you know, and my sponsor would push me. He would invite me to go to, you know, coffee after the meeting, right? Or go have dinner, or go to these different events that's my men's group that was part of barbecues, you know, family gatherings. And so I think it's really important that when you get out of treatment, especially for a newcomer, is to get a sponsor, start working the steps, and find you a home group that you feel comfortable with, and find you a 12-step fellowship that you like. There's so many, right? You know, there's AA, NA, CA, CMA, you know, HA, whatever you find, get in where you fit in, right? Is what I tell guys. And so I think at that point, once you get through the steps, then it's time for you to start reaching out and helping the next addict and alcoholic. And I think that's where you find your community, you find your tribe, you find some guys that are like-minded like you, and you start working with them, and they become kind of your group of guys that beside your sponsor that you can lean on when you're going through those highs and low points of your life, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't care if you got 19 days, 19 months, or 19 years. Your life is gonna. I hear guys in the program say, I got a pretty boring life. And what I mean by boring is that there's not chaos in it, right? But guys says they just want to live their life like this, and if I tell people all the time, if your life is like this, that means flatlining, right? Yeah. When you go into the hospital and they put those EKG on you, that your heart is going, they're showing you on that monitor, and it's going up and down. Yeah. So that's life. It's going to ebb and flow. So in order for me to go through that, I got to be grounded into the program and to have a power greater than myself, a higher power, God, yeah. Right? Or whoever you choose to call your higher power. But if you don't have those necessary tools, you're not going to stay sober, because you got to have that support. I can't do this alone, right? Because if I did, I wouldn't need to go to the fellowship. I wouldn't need to go to meetings. And then it becomes a working part of your life. It's just like when you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth and you brush your hair or you shave or take a shower, going to meetings, helping out another alcoholic or addict, it just becomes a normal part of your life. You don't think about it, you just do it, right? That's why they tell us when we're in treatment, go to do 90 and 90. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a recovery term. It's a term that people use to say, because if you do something 90 days in a row, it becomes a habit. Right? Yeah. And so if you're going to start working out, right? If you're going to start eating healthier, you do it for 90 days straight. You start going to 90 meetings in 90 days, call your sponsor 90 days in a row, yeah. That it becomes a working order, so that when something does happen, you do it automatically, because you've been doing it for so long. And that's kind of, that's what I tell guys. Just get plugged in, get a sponsor, get a home group, become an active member in that home group, and you'll see your life start to change.
Yeah. That's awesome that you touched on the fact that Arizona is kind of like a hotbed when it comes to just accessibility to treatment, all of the outpatient programs, the different sober livings, and everything here. It is like a destination for people that come from all over the country. They come to Arizona to find recovery and treatment, right. And because we're in such a unique position like this, we really have like kind of a platform here to just like show people different circles, different just introduce them to like different people. And in the process, I get to like talk to a lot of different people too. And that's been like the coolest thing for me too, is just being able to like meet, people, if they do CR, if they do, like you said, any of the A's or whatever it may be. The commonality is working the 12 steps and applying those principles into our lives. Now, I did want to ask you this because it's kind of becoming a popular question on the podcast, but out of the 12 steps, which one is your favorite and why?
Oh, man. Well, I got sober when I was 35 years old, right? I just turned 54 this past September. So by the time I got into the program, I had created a lot of wreckage in my life. Mm-hmm. There was I was married. There was different issues with different companies that I worked for. So the amends process for me was probably greater than anything I had ever. Step one obviously was step one is the foundation of our program, right? It's telling us that I admitted complete defeat. I'm done. I don't know where I'm going or where you're taking me, God, but I can't live this way. I always enjoy when I hear speakers talk, and they talk about the insanity. Kind of like we shared earlier, how the things that I was doing in my life and how drugs and alcohol were taking me to the bad direction. And then right before they talk about how things are good today and what has God and recovery has given them, there's that moment of in our literature, it says the moment of clarity, right? Or that surrender, where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And that's the part that I like, because I know what's coming next, right? You know, you hear these speakers online, podcasts, and they just talk about how their lives were just destroyed, right? And families torn apart, people have died in their lives, overdose. Here in the United States of America, even especially in Phoenix, we have this fentanyl crisis, and we just see it every day, you know. And then you see how these people surrender, and they make it into treatment, and they're like, God, I can't do this, help me, right? And so through that process, coming back to the question that you asked me, my favorite, what I enjoy is the amends process in my life. Because through that process, I've been able to reconnect with friends and family that I went to school with, my own family that are my blood family. I can hang my head high and not be ashamed of going anywhere, knowing that I have made some things right in my life, right? I'd made amends with my wife. I made amends with people that I had wronged in either a financial way or in a personal way. And wasn't easy. You see a lot of guys, people fall off after step 6 and 7 because they're like, I'm not doing that.
It's
right?
daunting, man. Because it's like, if you're new, you hear all these things like, oh, like you've got to go. The first, it's like, oh, step 5, like I've got to go tell someone all of my deepest, darkest secrets and all of these things. And then all of a sudden it's like, now I have to go to like everyone that I owe money to, everyone, like everything. I have to like go show face and like make it right, and that is very daunting.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's kind of like, I call it. Back in the day, there was this TV show called My Name Is Earl. I don't know if you remember, but the premise of the show is
I love My Name Is Earl.
Okay,
love that.
So
show.
He won this lotto, right?
Yeah.
But he had all this bad karma that came. All these people that he screwed over, in the past. So every episode, it was about him making that right? Yeah. So he could continue to get, and that's what he used that money for, right? That he won this lotto. And so that's what I tell guys. I said, look, I developed all this bad karma, and I gotta make this right. And the book tells me that, right? It clearly states in there, at this point, it was remembered in the beginning that we were willing to go to any lengths to stay sober. And I wasn't willing to take that step. I had to be pushed a little bit by my sponsor. You got to do this,
Yeah.
And what I found out through that process is not only that I free the people that I had held hostage for so long because I wasn't willing to make these things right, and to acknowledge and say, I was wrong for doing this to you. What can I do to make it right, And that it also allowed me to grow and understand that if, there's a term that says, in order for me to be forgiven, I have to forgive, right?
Yep.
And so if somebody did something to me, I got to forgive them in order for others to forgive me. And I got to live this life right. That's just not if I owed a guy $500 and I paid him off, that was in, but there's a thing called a living amends.
Yeah.
Which I tell guys all the time, everybody in a 12-step meeting can be a rock star. Right? They can say the right things. They can quote different parts of the book. Some guys can even memorize the whole how it works, our literature. But how do I act when I'm outside of those 4 walls, right? Let me go hang out with Eric for the day. Let me go hang out with this guy, see how he acts with his peers. Yeah. How does he interact with his family?
The other 23 hours
exactly.
of the day. Yeah.
There's an old timer in one of the meetings I used to go to. He says, Ray, it's better to talk with the tongue of your shoe than the tongue of your mouth. Are you walking what you're talking? And that was something that for me, that was kind of a slap in the face. Like, okay, because people are watching you. Like you said, I'm aware of the fact that, because in my job, I take an H&I commitment to this facility, and a lot of the people that are in there are just getting out of prison or off of the streets. And 9 times out of 10, I see them out in the community. And if I'm not acting like I am in the rooms, then I'm just being a hypocrite, man.
Yeah. And it's like, and to kind of touch on that too, what I've learned as well is that, people just by, putting this content online and putting the message out there and reaching a wider audience, people start paying attention because now they're trying to find the faults in things,
Exactly.
right? And they're trying to be like, well, he's saying this, but then I saw him doing this, or I saw him doing that. And so that's another thing of accountability, where it's just like, it really is an entirely new way of living, and it's, in order for it to be effective, it has to be throughout your entire life, at your home life, in your relationships, with your family, your job, just when you're out like in public. You know what I mean?
I told you earlier, my sponsor, his name is Terry Emmon, and before he became my sponsor, I would hear him at different meetings, and I had conversations with him over the years, and something that he really stuck with me that he told me one time was, Ray, if you want to know how I'm doing in recovery, go ask my wife, go ask my coworkers, go ask my customers, go ask my peers and my friends, and they'll tell you, because they see the real you, right? And when you put yourself out there on things like this, of course you're going to have some people that are going to, and I have to remember that I'm human and I make mistakes, right? I'm not always going to be nice. I'm not always going to be the, Mr. Look at this guy, and what I realize that comes with that, man, is that I'm at a point now in my life and in sobriety where I just need to help one guy. I don't want to be in the front. I want to be in the middle, right? Because if I'm in the middle, just kind of like a pack of wolves, right?
Yeah.
You're in the middle, nobody can come in and attack you, right? So the guy in front of me is my sponsor. He's the guy that's leading me through sobriety, right? And I'm the guy and behind me is my sponsee that I'm jumping into the hole and walking him up the 12 steps of the ladder of recovery, so that when he gets out, he can jump back in the hole and take another guy out. Because you can't tell the guy in the bottom how to do it. You got to get in the foxhole with them and show them how to do it, right? And that's what I learned from these guys. When I got into recovery, I was fortunate to be in a men's organization that really pushed sponsorship, man, and hardcore helping others. And I didn't want it. I'm selfish, by my very core. I'm a selfish. That's my wife. I'm selfish even now. Sometimes I don't think about her, right? I'll go grab something to eat or do something. Go, oh, I thought you would. And I'm just like, man, I'm just a piece of shit. I'm not thinking about it, right? Yeah. And so, in this program, 1 through 9 is about being selfless, right? It's about being selfish for yourself, rather, right? Yeah. We're getting through the steps. We're getting 1, 2, 3 is about me getting right with God. 4, 4, and 5 is me getting right with myself, right? 6, 7, and 8 is me, and 9 is me getting right with others. Mm-hmm. 10, 11, 12 is me helping the next person. The ex-addict and alcoholic, right? And so that's when it becomes selfless, right? And so I have to, in order for me to have what I have and to have the life that I have today, I have to reach out to the next person, right? And that's not always, because we don't always want to do it, man.
Right. Or sometimes we don't even feel like, well, what do I have to offer? You're so right. And it says in the literature too, right, where it's just like, before we go out and try to help people, right, the other side of this is like, we have to see to it that our own house is in order, right?
Exactly.
We have to see to it that our relationship with God is right before we go out and try to transmit something that we haven't got, right? And that's why you even hear in 12, it's having had a spiritual awakening. That means like you broke it down. 1 through 9 is like you're working on yourself.
Exactly.
It's like you're getting right with God. You're learning about yourself, and you're understanding that it's like, this disease is not just abstinence from drugs and alcohol that's going to solve this problem. It's a spiritual malady, right? And you have to find that connection with a higher power, and you have to lean on that in order to clear the wreckage of your past before you can even think about going out and trying to pull someone else out of the foxhole.
Exactly.
It's like, and that's something that, because I've been in the scene for a while, and I've had some relapses, and that's one thing that I realized so clearly this time around was that, you hear all the time, go out and help others, but sometimes it's like, well, if you really want to like be in a position to like help someone pull them out of that foxhole, you've got to first get out yourself. It's like if you're halfway up the ladder and you're trying to haul someone the other half of the way with you, it's not going to work.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think it's important, Eric, too, that you, not just in recovery, but outside in your own community. Yeah. You can volunteer. You can help out your neighbor. You know, I live in a pretty my neighborhood. I live in a nice part of the neighborhood, and these people have no idea that that a drug addict lives next to them, right? Yeah. And so sometimes. One time my wife called me like, hey, the neighbor heard something wrong with her dog. Can you go over there and help? Well, I was busy running my route, and I called the neighbor. I said, hey, can you go and help? I was helping her. She's an elderly woman, and something happened to her puppy, and she was trying to get her into the car to take her to the vet. And so being of service just doesn't mean being in recovery. It's outside in the community. Volunteering at a food bank. Yeah. Helping out in the community, right? There's a lot of organizations and people that we're involved in their circles. We go out and help people for Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? Yeah. So much was given to me that I have to give it back, and so never. There's always a position or a job for anybody in recovery. Nobody's telling you to go out and sponsor 15 or 20 guys. You
go save the whole valley.
Yeah, you can't. And you had Paul on here the other day, and we were talking the other day. I told him we were going to go save the world, right? At least Mesa, and that's not a reality, right? You can only help one person at a time, and then that person helps somebody else. So. Everybody, I truly believe that if you're in recovery and you don't think you can help out in some way, you can. There's a position at any level, be it in your home group, at a state level, at a national level, H&I commitments. You can do something. This is doing something. Yeah. This is being of service. This is a position that I've been around a little bit, and I haven't seen this before on this platform like this. There is people that do this, but not from me looking at it from outside. I was like, man, that's pretty cool that he's doing that, because you're taking a step out of your comfort zone and doing this, knowing that people are going to you're going to have some detractors, right? And some people are going to question what you're doing or why you're doing it. But I think this will help people to understand that okay, if those guys are doing it, maybe I can do it. Believe me, there was no way that I thought I was going to be sober this long, man. All I wanted to do was get my wife back, get a job back, and to be a good pet owner to my Chihuahua.
Get some money back in your pocket, and then
that was it, And I was wanting to get I came in here with some charges and probation. I wasn't.
You weren't on a winning streak.
I wasn't, no, like they tell us, and I was. If I didn't stay in that treatment center, they were going to send me away for a little while. And so what I understood was when I had that seizure and I walked into that treatment facility in the second week of September, that this was my shot at recovery, and I had to go at it. My first sponsor used to tell me all the time, you go after your recovery like you chase your high. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do today. I go at it with the same zeal and the same. I have to, man, because this is what gave me the life that I have today. Right. And that's what I hopefully that I stress today to people out there is that I had to do this like my life and it did. My life depended on. I didn't have another option, man. Yeah. You hear people all the time in the room and say, I was hopeless and dopeless, and I was. Yeah. There was no. What do they call that in a job? There was no prospects out there.
No prospects on the horizon.
There was nothing there, and so this was my shot, and like you guys talk about, I finally surrendered and just asked my higher power. I said, show me something else, and let me be open.
Right.
There's a lot
just that sliver of willingness.
Just there. That's all you need. Just that sliver of hope, and listening to other people that come in and share their story with you while you're in a treatment. I'm a big proponent of H&I, hospital institutions. I've always had an H&I commitment since I got my sponsor pushed me in that arena, and I've continued to do it in detoxes and rehabs, and now I'm at this facility in East Mesa, and that's where you're giving those guys some hope. Mm-hmm. You're giving those men and women and those students to say, hey, look, I was sitting in that chair where you were, and I know what you feel like. And I didn't think anybody wanted to do with me. My family didn't want anything to do with me. I couldn't hold a job. I didn't even know how to bathe properly, right? And I said, somebody pulled me aside and said, this is what happened to me, and I'm going to show you how to stay sober. And that, and for another addict or alcoholic to tell another addict and alcoholic that's the most insane thing that I can never.
Yeah, because on paper it looks like the blind leading the blind. You're like, oh, this is the guy that's going to save
ship. You. Yeah, and it's like, man, but because you hear it all the time. If I got cancer or I got diabetes or if I got high blood pressure, I'm going to the doctor and he's going to tell me, hey, this is what you need to do or take this medication. But I'm going to go to a drug addict, an alcoholic, and say, hey, this is how you stay sober. Well, what do you know about it? Well, this is what I did. You know?
It's like, well, I'm an addict too, so I know.
Yeah, and that comes with experience, right? And when people share that with you, they're coming from a place that they know they've been there and done that, right? What the book said, how our experience can benefit others. And you touched on that, Eric. If there's been periods in my sobriety that I was dry, man. Wasn't going to meetings, very few meetings, still doing H&I work, but I just, it's kind of like a tree that's dry outside. You don't want to smoke a cigarette by it because if it'll blow up, right? It'll torch up, and that's kind of how I was. And I had to realize that I had to get back into the program, and that was with sponsorship, getting another new sponsor, getting a different mindset, and realizing that I had got where I was because I was doing those things. And there's a lot of factors in that. Life happens.
Right.
We had the, where I realized this the most was during the COVID, because I wasn't doing anything, man, and my sponsor was on the other side of town at the time. We were meeting at the park, and he was kind of like yelling at each other back and forth, and I finally made a choice. I said, when we came out of that, and I heard about this meeting that was going around, and I showed up, and it was kind of like a sense of relief, and this is what I was lacking. I was lacking a home group and a meeting that I would go to on a regular basis, right? And when I started doing that, and I changed the sponsor and went through my steps again, I realized that this is, helping people, and you have a different mindset. So I hope people understand you're going to go through those ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's not that I was out of recovery, but I was sober. I was sober.
You were out of the solution.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we had Nick H on the podcast a couple months ago, and he was touching on that too. But it's like I love how you brought it up as well, where it's like it was explained to me when I first was my first sponsor that I was working with, and he was like, when it comes to like, you have to be willing to go to any length, right? You have to have the desperation of a drowning man. It like tells us this, but like he made me understand it. He was like, how many times would I just sit there waiting for 6 a.m. so I could get to the liquor store and like get whatever of like $6 like pint of vodka or whatever it was, right? Because I had to. That was where I was at in my life. I had no other option, right? That's where I was at. And so he's like, so the next time that you want to use the excuse that, oh, you don't have a car so you can't get to a meeting or you can't do this. It's like, how many times when I had a breathalyzer in my car and I would walk 5-6 miles to the liquor store to go get alcohol, and it's like, meeting hall's 4 miles away, man. And it's like, then I realized, I'm like, oh, that's the same tenacity I used to use to stay drunk all day is the same tenacity that's gonna need to use to stay sober, because those are my only two options. I'm either gonna find a higher power and live on a spiritual basis, or I'm gonna go on till the bitter end. Exactly. And I was like, well, There we go.
There it is.
I love that you touched on that, man. And
my sponsor always used to, when I first got sober, and it happens to every guy. I see it and I get it, right? We get out of treatment, and first thing we want to do is get the job back, get the wife back.
You want to go start apologizing to everyone. Oh, I got to make things right.
Tap the brakes, right? And then my sponsor would tell me, and I'd be like, and he would say, hey, well, have you gone to a meeting today? Have you, because Brad, I don't have time. I got to get a job. I got to start making some money for my wife. My wife's been carrying me for the last 5 years. I said, I got to start, doing. He goes, well, when did you have time to go get high? And I was like, oh, man. He'd always hit me with these daggers, right? I said, oh, really? So when do you have time to go get high? I said, well, I made time. So I make that time to go to recover. The same time that the same time I was using to get my drink and drug and hustling every way I can, I just use that time. I just have a different mindset, right? It's a different mindset, right? We go from, I tell people all the time, I got to quit looking at what drugs and alcohol are doing for me and start looking at what they've done to me, right? Yeah. And then it becomes a negative, right? Because then I'm seeing the damage what you're doing to me. If what's Eric doing for me today? Well, he's keeping me sober today. For one day, we're talking recovery on a one-on-one basis, and that's how it started.
Yeah.
Bill and Bob, right? Founders of the program that kept us sober.
Yeah.
Today, when I call my sponsor, he said, well, how did you stay sober today? I talked to another guy about recovery on a podcast, right? And so that is the foundation of this program. And so I have to incorporate that in my own life and say, okay, I made time to do this, and I think that's important that we realize that it's, I have to make this time that I use when I was out there doing the things I was doing and turn it into a positive this is what recovery is doing for me.
Yeah.
Not to me. I listen to a lot of motivational speakers and different types, all these different, not only in recovery, but just in business, these guys that motivate you to, have a better life, right? And the guy always says all the time, don't look what life is doing to you, do what it's doing for you, right? Life is not out to get me. Everybody's not out to get me, right? I'm not the victim. Look what it's doing for you. If this is what you're doing for me now, if I say, what is Eric doing to me? Well, he's talking behind my back. He's saying something like that, or he says, he's making me feel insecure. I have to look at it in a different way, a different mindset. Is what are we doing? What am I doing for you, right? And that's what I got to look at drugs and alcohol. It wasn't doing anything for me anymore. It was doing it to me.
Yeah, and that's part of the spiritual awakening is that perspective shift where it's like we start separating that and we start understanding that just because I go to treatment for 30 days and get a month sober doesn't mean that life is going to change. What's going to change is that I am going to change how I'm reacting and getting involved in life.
Exactly.
How I participate in my life is going to change. Life itself is not going to stop being the way that it is.
Exactly.
Right? And that was a big part of that. And then you talk about like, and the literature talks about it too, where it's like, my mind does that from time to time where I start forgetting what alcohol did to me, and I only can somehow, I have this weird thing where I only remember what it did for me. I only remember like the glimpses of the good times. It's like, and I'm only looking at 5% of what it actually was. And they talk about that, right? Where it's like, I can't with sufficient force bring to memory the tragedies of a month ago, a week ago, even a day ago. Right? And that's the disease centering in my mind. And so if I'm not, like you said, talking with another alcoholic or being involved in participating in my recovery on a daily basis, my mind's default is going to go back to the 5%, the glimpses of the good, and it's not going to remember everything else that led me to the point where I had to go sit in a treatment center for 30 days and have them teach me how to be a grown-up at 25 years old.
Exactly. I think a lot of times people, I speak for myself, we live such a chaotic life in our disease that when we get into recovery and life starts getting good, we start getting scared and thinking, oh, it can't be this good, right?
The other shoe's
the shoe's going to drop. When is that next oh my God, when's the next tragedy is going to happen? Or when, something's bad's got to happen. And it doesn't need to be that way, because I'm putting that out there in the universe, right?
Yeah.
What I put out there, I'm getting back. And what I realize is that I truly believe that the 12 steps and the founding members of our program, they designed, it clearly states that this is a design for living, right? Yeah. And if I'm doing this on a daily basis, I can have a good life. I mean, you see people. I love those before and after pictures of when they got sober, when they were
the intake.
Oh
picture,
my God! It's
yeah.
like, man, it's a completely different person, and they're smiling and they're happy. You can see this glow. It's a glow of recovery, And I love. I'm a big of the comeback stories,
Everyone loves
right?
story.
And in sports and in movies, I'm watching this and I'm crying, and it's just, but you hear about it in recovery, and it's just like, man, and to see these people, especially the younger people, that's what gets me going. It's people between the ages of 20 and 30, man. I was fortunate enough that when I got sober, there was a group of guys that came up behind me that were all in their, Nick H. and a bunch of those guys that came up when they were in their 20s and 30s. And to see their lives now and transform, to have families, to have careers, to graduate from college, and to be successful in their life, and they're still grounded in recovery is amazing, because you just don't know where this ride's going to take you, man.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to hold on, and everything is possible once you get sober and you have a different mindset of the way life is going to be. But it all starts with the foundation. I got to continue to do these things, right? Go to meetings, have a sponsor, have a God of my understanding, have a God in my life, because that's what the 12 steps are designed
It's
for.
all contingent upon the maintenance of the spiritual condition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're not spiritually fit, things are going to start to eat at you, right? Traffic, family, my wife.
It's like they say, it's not the bear that eats your lunch, it's the ants.
Yeah.
It's that little thing. Like you said, this guy, the shopping cart didn't get put away, and then someone cut me off in traffic, and then slowly but surely I find myself at the end of the day irritated, restless, and I'm not happy with how my day went. Well, you got to look at all those little things that incrementally were going on throughout the day, where if I'm not connected, if I'm not plugged into my higher power, if I'm not participating in this program, I very easily find myself in just a 24-hour span completely different than where I was the day prior. They say yesterday's shower doesn't keep you clean today.
No.
It is kind of, it's a lot to wrap your head around, but then the cliches start making sense when that becomes your experience. But, it wasn't until I had achieved about 2 years of sobriety, then decided I want to go back out and do more research, and swiftly found that, okay, well, that didn't work, right? And then I come back, and it was that experience, in my story at least, where that's when all of a sudden the same words I had read for 2 years prior to that had an entirely different meaning. It had an entirely different meaning in my life, and I've seen it from an entirely different lens.
Well, I think what happens too is I remember I started in 2002 was the first time I walked in a 12-step meeting. Back then it was still in the yellow pages, and I looked up a Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Mesa. And I went to this meeting, and this guy shared his story. And I'll never forget it. I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was sitting in the back with my wife, and his name was Chuck C. And I remember, and I just said, oh my God, he's talking about me. But I was like, yeah, this is dumb. These people are full of shit, And I walked outside. My wife was like, hey, these people are just, I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. And so I started talking to these guys, right? And everything they told me that was going, they had been where I was going. My ego and my pride would tell me, no, I'm different, right? I got a better way to do this, right? I can use cocaine socially, and that wasn't
like a gentleman,
like a gentleman, whatever that is. And so by the time September the 11th of 2004 rolled around, 2 years later, everything that those guys told me that was going to happen happened. And just like you said, when you came back in the program, Eric, you realized that what those sayings, all the stuff on the wall, the cliches, the hokey stuff, just come back. We love you till you love yourself. Let go, let God. You're just like, oh my God, what am I in this? weird universe. What I mean, but they're true. I understood what they meant. The message had depth and weight at that point, because I realized that what they were saying, I didn't think I would go that far. There was a guy that was in our program for many years, and they used to call him Terry the Hat. And Terry the Hat would say, drugs and alcohol took me further than I ever wanted to go, make me do things that I never said I would do, make me spend more money than I ever had. And, and I would think, that's true. I was raised with some morals and values growing up.
Yeah.
And my addiction, instead of me going up to my morals and values, my morals and values came down to my addiction, right? I would never do this, and I did that. I would never do this, and I did that. And so instead of me rising up to those morals and values, I reduced them to where I was at in my life, and I never thought that would happen. Yeah. But when you're in the grips of your addiction and your alcoholism, and that's the only thing that you're thinking about and doing for 24 hours a day, you're going to do whatever it takes to do it, you know. And that's what I understood, that if, like you said, I got to do this just as hard as I did my disease, Yeah. And that's what it comes down to.
And that's one of the most important factors too when you talk about like the importance of H&Is is you're going into these treatment centers, and if you're speaking to a room full of 30 people, you may only actually be speaking to 1 or 2 people in that room that are hearing what you're saying. And out of those 1 or 2, maybe a seed is planted in 1, and they may not even get it that time around. You know what I mean? But it's like, when we're sitting in treatment, we all have those ideas. I'm going to take what works for me and leave what doesn't. And I know better. And these guys don't know my story, and I'm unique and blah, blah, blah. And it takes a while. It takes a while to break that down. But eventually, the seed is planted at different stages. And so that's why it's so important to be in an H&I setting and to just share that experience, because eventually that depth and weight will be there, and the person who needs to hear it will hear it at the right time. Right? Whether it's their 3rd time in treatment, their 1st time in treatment, whatever it is, you're never going to reach everybody in treatment, because some people are there for court. Some people are there because their parents are there, or their wife, or whatever it is. But it's the seeds getting planted at every single stage.
When Bill was going to doing these hospitals and going down, and these guys weren't staying sober, right? He would go home and complain to his wife, complain to Lois that, that nobody was staying sober, right? He was feeling like he wasn't doing anything good, right? He just felt like, why am I doing this, when nobody's staying sober behind it? And she said, Bill, you're sober, right? And that's why we do that. I go in that facility every week, and I pray every time I go in there. I hope that somebody gets the message, and usually they do, right? There's guys in there that are willing to do it, that want to stay sober, but it's a reminder for me every week that I go in there that the disease didn't stop. People didn't stop using drugs and alcohol. My cocaine dealer didn't stop dealing cocaine whenever I got sober. I mean, there was 20 customers behind me. Right?
Alcoholism is the same today as it was 100 years ago.
They just have different alcohol, right? And so what I realized is that if I don't keep doing this, that I'm going to be in that facility, right? But by me going in there on a weekly basis, it's a reminder. Those people keep me sober more than I will them. They'll get sober without me. And I tell them this every week, hey, look, you're going to get sober without me. I can't stay sober without you. And that's the important part, right? Is that they might not, if they get anything or not, I hope they do, but if they don't, what I get out of it is that I get to stay sober and go home and be with my wife and family, right? And get to live another sober day and breathe another sober breath. And that's what I got to remember is when I go in there, is that I'm not going to be able to help all those guys, but they're going to be able to help me, you know?
That's so good, man. I do always a segment on here. It is the Odd or God Pod. You guys know what time it is. And it comes from that, again, cliche, is it odd or is it God? Where we have these moments, we call them God shots, right? Where, there's no logical explanation to how things played out other than it was just divine intervention. It was divine timing, whatever it is. It was a God shot. And so I always like to ask everybody on the pod, is there one that's memorable to you? Is there one that sticks out where you looked back and you said, wow, that was God working in my life, even if you didn't see it in that moment?
Here recently I've been trying to change, typical addict behavior. I'm 54 years old. 55, I'm 5 more years of working. I'm changing my career, right? I've had this business and I'm looking to go to get a regular job, and I've had some stuff in my past that I didn't know if I had cleared up the wreckage of my past, but I had applied at certain different companies and with the government, and there's nothing on my record. So I know that's God, right? I know that God allowed me to do the things to clear up the wreckage of my past, that there's nothing, I can go get a job. I'm not worried about having to, hey, did this happen? You got this, any crimes or anything? And there's nothing there. They send you a printout when I applied at these positions, and everything's on. There's nothing, and it's like, yeah, that's, I know that I didn't have, I had a place in it, but God is the one that helped me do through that.
100%. I've been on the other end of those where I'm sitting with the HR rep trying to explain the 3 things on the red that popped up and be like, well, I completed this and I'm doing this and like stating my case, but maybe after 7 years it'll be a different story. But no, that's cool, man. And then another thing too, as we kind of wrap up the episode here, this is probably what I've get the most feedback on, and so I really am integrating it into the show in general, is for anybody out there who's watching that's on the fence about going to treatment, attending a meeting, maybe moving into sober living, whatever it may be. Do you have any words of encouragement or pieces of advice for them?
I just tell people if you don't like where you're at in your life now, there's a saying in recovery, right? You keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And if you don't know that if recovery is, if going into treatment, going into sober living, or just going into a 12-step meeting, you don't have to go to rehab to get sober. There was people getting sober way before rehab started, and so my suggestion to you is to keep an open mind, and what I tell guys all the time, look yourself in the mirror and say, if you don't like where your life is today, try something different, and keep an open mind. Trust the process, because my ideas will get me loaded. Let me try somebody else's, right? Let me get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And by going into a treatment facility, to a sober living facility, or just walking into a meeting and listening to what these people say and see if there's something that you can connect with, and then find somebody that has a working knowledge of this program and have been through the steps themselves, and to take you through the steps and see how your life will change.
Yeah. Nothing changes and nothing changes.
Exactly. You hit it right on the head, Eric. That's a great way to phrase that, is if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you get. And if there's a changes, if nothing changes.
What's the other one? If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done.
Exactly.
Yeah, again, we should just name this episode Cliches. Oh man,
that's funny.
You always hate to
oh
hear
my
it.
God,
Easy does it, one day at a time.
Yeah, let go, let God.
Meeting makers make
my
it.
God, and it's like put the plug in the jug, and you're
works
just like,
you work
keep
it.
coming back, know. But it's true, and it's as hokey as it sounds, and as there's, another one is keep it simple, right? And we have to keep this. This is not. You hear this time. This isn't for the program that people that want. It's for people that do it, right? But if you keep it vanilla as possible and try not to overcomplicate it, and we're overcomplicated people in general, so just trust the process and the way that it is in the book, and you'll see that your life will continually get better. Yeah. And I think there's no better way to say that or end this is just saying, just trust the process, and if my mind tells me to go left, go right. Do something different.
Yeah. That's good, man. I've always heard, this isn't really a recovery one, but I saw this on Facebook, I think. If nothing's going right, go left. And I was like, interesting. Pivot. Yeah. Well, man, I mean, I appreciate you making some time to stop by on the pod. You got a great message, man, and I'm sure we're going to get some good feedback and stuff on it, and it's always awesome. Stuff like this is great just for me, for like selfish reasons, because it's like, aside from this, I mean, when would we ever had time to sit down for an hour and get to know each other a little bit better? Right. So it was truly cool to have you join us today, and I appreciate it.
Well, I thank you for asking. Like I said, I observe, right? That's why I sit in the back of the room at meetings, because I'm always watching to see how people act. And maybe it's my paranoia or something. If something happens in the meeting, I can get by the door quickly. But I see what you guys are doing in recovery and what you're doing here with this podcast and what you're doing in your life. And it's, I'm attracted to that because I want to, okay, well, who's this, how is this, what's this guy doing? How is he, because it encouraged me to keep doing this, man, because I know that people are going to keep coming. It's not about me anymore. It's about the new guy. It's about you guys coming up. It's about the newcomer. I went through my steps. Now it's time for the other guy to come in here. And as you get older, there's going to be other people coming. That's just how life is. And to see this program, if I were to die tomorrow, I would know that the recovery in the state of Arizona is in perfect hands. And it's nothing that I did or that my sponsor did or anybody else. It's what God did for us, and to see this growing and seeing where it's going, it really encouraged me to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know that there's success here.
That's awesome.
People
man.
are staying sober, man. So thank you guys for doing that. And thank you for asking me. I'm really humbled and honored to be here today.
Thank you, man. And real quick, just because I thought about it when you were talking about sitting in the back of the room, I remember this guy told me a story at GIT, and I don't know if it was like a fabricated story or not, but he said there was this guy that would sit in meetings with his eyes closed, and everyone always thought he was sleeping, and so finally someone gets upset and calls him out, and he just says, no, I sit in meetings with my eyes closed, so I see with my ears, not my eyes. Right. Exactly. And it's like, and I hear the message. I don't judge the person. I just hear the message.
Right. It's my sponsor, it's funny you say that. My sponsor, there was this guy at a meeting I used to go to, and oh my God, he would say the same thing, right? Every cliche, I was good and bad example before I got sober, and I would go to my sponsor, man, this guy, he just really he goes, are you looking at him? Or are you staring? And there was a guy in the meeting doing that, and I asked him, why do you do that? And he said, because I want to, because being in sales my whole life, I'm looking at you, right? I'm trying to figure out how I can connect with you because I'm going to try to sell you something. Well, now I'm selling AA, right? And so when I'm in the meeting, I'm looking at somebody and I'm trying to figure out if it's a newcomer, how I can approach this individual and say, hey, welcome, how are you doing? Here's my name, here's my phone number. But I'm judging you by how you look, right? I'm not listening to what you're saying. So he goes, why don't you go to the meeting and close your eyes and listen to what that guy's saying instead of how he looks, because you're judging him from you're looking at him from the outside. You're looking at him. You're not listening to the message. You want to hear what they're saying from their heart.
Yeah.
And what I realize is that I'm judging the person based on how they look or what they're saying instead of listening. And that's helped me a lot because who am I? That's like the pot calling the kettle black, right?
And alcoholism and addiction is the great equalizer. Yes. It doesn't discriminate. No, it doesn't care. Your upbringing, what part of town you live on, what job you have. It doesn't care.
No, it doesn't.
And you really learn that when you hit the melting pot. They say America is the melting pot. Rehab is the melting pot. Because you're sitting in there for 30 days and you're like, Wow, dude, like then you really get that. You puts it into perspective. You're like, oh no, this is like an everybody problem.
Exactly.
This is an everybody problem.
Nobody is not immune to this disease, and I'm grateful that there was two men sitting together one time
in the 30s, and I think about this a lot, because you really need to put the timeline together and like my sponsor did this with me, and it gave me a greater appreciation for what we have going on, because I was one of those guys trying to pick apart everything and find the holes in the story. And then when you take a step back and you look at it and you say, in the 30s, in the midst of the greatest depression this country has ever seen, when conflict is going on in Europe and the world is about ready to go back into another world war, there's all of these excuses as to why it shouldn't have happened. Right. And yet these guys were out there in the trenches, and it's like there wasn't such thing as like a meeting hall. They were just taking this to, like, they were finding people and just letting them stay in their houses and whatever it may be, and they were just creating what eventually turned into this program. And when you understand that, you put that into perspective, that the first 20 years of what they were doing that was probably the greatest conflict on the world stage we've ever seen, and it was mushrooming into what it is today. Then it's like, well, Mr. Intellectual Mind, explain that. Yeah, well, Mr. Pick a hole apart in every story. It's like, if it worked for them back then, when there was no rehab offering saunas and acupuncture for 30 days for you to get sober, and there was a draft looming over their heads and they were getting shipped out. If it worked for them then, why can't it work for me now? And I was like, whoa, that makes a lot of sense.
You're talking about a spiritual movement, man, that people have tried to debunk for years, and there's people have said this or that, and it's not for everybody, right? It was a 12-step program that had worked for me, and I'm not going to try to change anything in the process, right? And for it to carry along all this time, what are we now, 80-something years that it's been going on, that who am I going to try to, I can't reinvent the wheel, right?
No. It's like quite literally, my best thinking ends me up, I end up broke. Nobody likes me. It's like, if I am just left unsupervised, that is where I will be. I know that to be true. So it's like, if that's my best thinking, then how am I also going to use that logic to say I can reinvent this thing that's worked for people throughout this entire time? You know what I mean? It's like, dude, look at Coca-Cola, how many times they've changed their logo and whatever, because they have to keep adapting to the times to stay relevant. The first 164 pages of that book never had to change.
That doesn't change.
So that's a recipe that's tried and true.
And and they tell you, if they wrote a book about you, would you read it? And it's the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it no matter it doesn't matter where I open it or what page I open it to or what story I read, I always read something different in it. And that's an amazing thing, that I know that God had his hand in it, or had a hand in that, in this. The spiritual aspect of that, like you guys touch in this podcast, is, in Bill's story, he talks about it, that he was laying in the hospital for the last time, and it came to him that there was other alcoholics suffering like he was, and in order for him to stay sober, he had to help them. And the doctor said, I don't know what happened to you, but you better hold on to it. And for him to have that spiritual awakening at his lowest point in his life, I mean, who am I to say that I can do better than that? Right. I just gotta. It works for me, and I'm not gonna do anything else.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, and I'm the same way. I'm in the same boat where it's just like, you know what? You can sit there and try to do what you want, but I'm just gonna continue doing this, because it's like, I sat down and read a passage, and this is when I understood what alcoholism was, right? And I understood what people were saying for years, where it said I truly was an alcoholic long before I ever took my first drink, right? And it was like, I always had this idea that if I could just get somebody to do this, and if they would just fall in line with my vision for this, and if everybody else would bend to my will, then they would be happy bending to my ideal world. And it's just like, and then there would be no conflict, there would be world peace, we would end hunger because everyone would do what I think they should do.
Exactly.
And it's like, that is what alcoholism is. You know what I mean? And then it just manifested itself into, the drinking, and then I developed a physical craving for it. And now I can't stop. But it's like, that was what the problem was. The problem is that I think I know better than God. Exactly. I think that I, Eric Para, can rule the world better than everybody else can, and they would be happy that I was ruling the world because everything would just fall into place. And that's not reality. That's alcoholism. It's kind of crazy when you break it down like that, and then you try explaining that to like a newcomer, and they're like, "Wait, no, I don't want none of that. I just want to stop drinking.
Yeah.
I just want to be sober." Well, okay. You're not ready. You're not ready for that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's way deeper.
Yeah, you go a little bit deeper. When you talk to a guy and you tell them that, alcohol and drugs not their problem, they look at you like you're insane. And once you start breaking that book down with them and explaining it to them, of course there's the addiction part, right? That I did it before, the book clearly states I did it for the effect, right? Mm-hmm. And then I crossed that line into addiction, and then I couldn't stop on my own, right? And then I separated myself from my substance for 28 days, and then my mind was like, okay, now I'm ready to listen to what these guys are trying to tell me, or I don't know if I fully comprehend what they were saying to me, but I understood the fact that I had a clear mind and the cloud had fogged off of my brain, that came off of my brain, the fog was off, and that sentence that clearly states that alcohol is but a symptom of my disease. Mm-hmm. I had to get down to the causes and conditions.
Yeah.
And the causes and conditions in my life is that like you just shared, if everybody just did what I wanted them to do, my life would be great. And that's not the case. That is fictional. Yeah. In reality, people don't care what you do or how you do it. You just have to make sure that you don't how you act or towards them about how things happen in your life is different than what you did before. The world doesn't revolve around me.
Right. I'm not the main character.
Exactly.
Out of all 7.5 billion people in the world,
exactly.
Breaking news, I'm not the most important one. it's
like throwing a rock into the ocean.
Yeah.
And you're just another ripple in the ocean. That's all we are.
Yeah, and it's so awesome, man, because it's just like, I could just go on and on about it, but it's just like, you're right. It's like, I drank because I liked the effect produced by alcohol, and then I liked it so much it became my obsession that somehow, some way, I'm going to be able to drink with impunity like everybody else. So now that's the great obsession of my life. And so now, regardless of what I'm doing, who I'm with, I'm in my head, I'm thinking about when is my next drink and how am I going to somehow manage to do this and get that effect produced without completely tearing my life down. And I am just going to continue that until I die.
Yeah.
Like, that is my life. And they found that out without all of this, psychology and everything that we have today. They just found that out by observation in the 30s. Where it was
it's amazing how it just obviously complete abstinence is the beginning, right? We have to separate ourselves, but then you start reading and understanding the literature and how these guys approached it, and it was an 8-step program, right? Now we're getting later in the end of this, but that's what it came from. It was this program that they started in the Oxford group, and then we brought it into. Then they created the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill and Bob and the guys that came with him, founding members, and it's too much for me to try to wrap my hands around. I just know that what they created gave me the life that I had today, and I'm just gonna keep doing it. I don't know what happened or how it happened. I made a decision, right? We make a decision to stop. That's where the light switch goes off. But how do I continue to do this and have long-term sobriety is by keep doing the program on a daily basis. You know? And you're gonna fail, right? We're human.
Oh yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
as long as I hold myself accountable with a sponsor, keep myself involved in the program, I can get through those lows and high spots in my life. So.
Yeah. And it's just, and we'll kind of end on this, but I know you just keep rambling, but it really does blow my mind that these like middle-aged dudes back in the 30s somehow knew who I am as like a modern like mid-20s and 2023. It's like, it's the same. It is the exact same. It's like there's no difference of like what they're explaining.
There's your God shot.
Yeah. It's like 80 years before I was born, they were like, oh yeah. This guy, this is his problem, and this is how he's gonna solve it, and we're gonna write it down, and it's gonna stand the test of time, and it's gonna live on. And it's pretty crazy to think that in 10 years it's gonna be 100 years of it going. In just 100 years, look what it's done.
Millions of people have been saved all over the world by this program.
How many other things over the past 100 years, aside from like Ford automobiles, is like followed that same model?
Yeah.
Really?
Crazy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It really is. Well, thank you, dude. I appreciate it. This is a great episode. Fun. Thank you, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Also, shout out to the sponsor, Plugged In Recovery, www.azsober.com if you want to check out some of the houses or reach out for help. We'll see you guys next week.